A very warm welcome to this MTSS vlogcast series. I'm Lisa Collins, one of the founders of MTSS, and I'm delighted to be joined here with Deep Kambay, who is the founder of Regenerating Business. In this episode, we are going to be looking at ESG reporting regulations. So let's make a start. Deep, ESG reporting regulations have exploded over the last few years. Talk us through the reasons why this has happened.
Yeah, huge, and there's a lot of confusion about it, and I still think there still is, and there will continue to be. So COP26 was very much a watershed moment for ESG regulations. So before COP26, as we mentioned in previous episodes, there's a lot of ESG frameworks, and they were very much voluntary frameworks to report against. Very hard to benchmark because they're all nuanced in their own way. And when COP26 kind of came, it kind of really introduced and kind of strengthened the idea of mandatory regulations, and that was coming. It was, there were bits coming, bits implemented, but this was significant. And the reason for it is that kind of the finance industry, investors, there was a kind of tipping point of where there was such a demand to understand from them, what is a business's performance, what's the risk attached to the business, what's the kind of opportunities of the business, what's the value of investing in them. And it's not looking at the short term anymore. It's about looking at the longer term resilience of a business and kind of getting that understanding. And because all of these benchmarks are so different, nuanced, couldn't benchmark one against the other, they're completely like worlds apart. It's very complicated. So there's this demand to consolidate, have like more international standards to look at and to be able to make comparisons and benchmarking, business versus business, industry versus industry. And so that's kind of where it came from. And COP26 launched the International Sustainability Standards Board. And I always hesitate when it comes to acronyms because I can hardly remember them myself, let alone like anybody else outside of the industry. So apologies for that. And so it's still very new. So there is a lot of regulation out there, and I'll come on to the ISSB in a minute. But another part of that kind of consolidation world and kind of the regulatory world is the EU. So the EU are considered one of the most kind of robust, kind of detailed ESG regulations in the marketplace. They are really, I would consider, at the forefront, looking at ESG in a broader way, in a deeper way, and those laws have only come into place this year. So in 2025, large institutes such as who have over 50 million turnover, 25 million assets, with over 500 employees are going to have to report against their financial year 2024 on this. And there is a lot going on in there, which we'll talk about again, in other episodes, what that entails. But, you can see there's a whole list, across the globe of all of these regulations coming into play. As you can see, and when you look at the kind of the dotted ones is where the regulations are actually coming into place now.
So how do those regulations differ from country to country?
That is a good question, but we're looking at it from, it really depends on the laws and regulations of different countries. But what has happened with the ISSB is it's created a framework, like an international framework, which is still, people are grappling with it. Different countries are adopting it into mandatory legislation. So the UK and other countries, when you look at the map, you start to see where, you know, they are putting the ISSB into mandatory legislation. And at the moment, there are two frameworks connected into this that would really make sense, that's in the marketplace. Very much prioritising on climate at the moment. We will see the S grow very, very soon, and the G to complement all of them. So the two frameworks are the TCFD, which is the Task Force Climate Financial Disclosures, and then you've got the SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standard Board. So those two are consolidated together into the ISSB. Now, this marketplace is moving. It's not finalized yet, so they are still working on developing sector-specific standards for the ISSB. So, you know, what they've put in place is very much general climate-focused standards, and each country will then build their regulations, mandatory regulations, on top of that framework. And they are all working towards that interoperability, so how they work together and how they've got this synergy together. So, you know, as I say, it's confusing for anybody right now because it's moving at a pace and they're all at different stages. So all countries are at different stages, different levels of maturity. So it's quite a difficult one to get your head around, but, you know, we are getting there.
And clearly the mandatory requirements are going to continue to increase.
Yes.
What are going to be the biggest challenges for businesses, do you think?
So the key challenge is data. Data is kind of key. I mean, lots of large businesses, they deal with a handful of financial KPIs, which is very much established, standardized, understood on a global level of how a company looks at performance from a financial lens. The non-financial lens is, you know, up for grabs. You know, it's still very like everybody trying to work it out. So, and, you know, there are many data points. You know, you're looking about 1,000+ data points, KPIs. You're looking at every aspect, the environmental, not just carbon, biodiversity, water, waste. Then you've got your, you know, your social, not just your employees, but your suppliers, all the way through your value chain, transparency, all the way through to any raw materials. And you're crossing different industries. A camera company, for example, is connected to the mining industry when you're thinking about the raw materials of their actual product. And then, you know, how are companies making those decisions? What's the infrastructure in place? So, you know, the key challenges are kind of data, how to report on that. A lot of companies will have to go through digital transformation projects, huge transformation projects, and I think that's in line with lots of other aspects of business as well, and education and engagement, kind of getting a holistic understanding of what that actually means in a commercial sense.
Yeah, and I know from an industry point of view, we're not great with our data right now, and I'm looking forward to the industry to be able to gather that data and we can benchmark ourselves and be able to see who's doing great. Are there any good industries benchmarking themselves on that data? On those
not
data
yet.
owners?
I would say you're not behind any other industries right now. Everybody is in the same boat and everybody is learning together.
And in terms of reporting regulations, what top tips would you leave on for this episode?
Oh, great question. So I think climate, keep as your priority. Look at those as, you know, what you want to disclose against. I know carbon is very much talked about within this industry, so that's great to see. But what is the industry talking about beyond carbon? So water, waste, biodiversity, and then connecting people. And it's being holistic about things, but not forgetting the governance aspect and people. I think it's very easy to silo things. So when we think about governance and people, we think of data privacy and cybersecurity in a very different kind of area, but actually that's all encompassing, is fully integrated into the E, the S, the G, and the financial, economic, and how they all interconnect together. So it's thinking about it as a full business strategy rather than having your business strategy over here and your ESG and sustainability over there. They're one of the same.
So bring it all together.
Yeah.
And I have to ask a question, because we're seeing more ESG job titles. Is that the way a business should go? Employ somebody dedicated to this?
I think you definitely need resource within your business dedicated to it. There's no standardized approach, no standardized titles right now. It's still very early if you think about the maturity levels. I mean, everybody knows what a CFO does or a CMO does, but not necessarily what sustainability is about. There's not a lot of chief sustainability officers out in the marketplace, but you're seeing it grow. And they're very much the facilitator, the connecting the dots, bringing it together, looking at from a strategic and how to translate it into operational action plans. But yeah, it's not standardised at all at the moment.
Great. Thank you, Deep. Thank you for joining us in this episode. Join us next time, where we're going to take a look at the EU CSRD. Thank you.